Hi everyone. We've got a few of you with us, Dee and Susan, it looks like. Myself and Sahu, being therapists, we're always working on manipulating the fascia, restoring the fascia, um, and when we look at the fascia is everything. And it in compromises, as you will see, more than what we think. However, it's not really in most of our awareness. But when we're looking at the whole of the aging process, you know, um, where as one gets older, they become a little bit more wrinkly, or they've got old ailments that really start to cause them a lot of trouble. um, these are things that are happening because of the fascia. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to briefly talk about the makeup of the fascia. Um, this is a topic that we can go into very great detail about, but we will keep it simple because it does not need to be complicated. Myofascia, or we could just say simply fascia. But as a therapist, I more work with the myofascia, which is basically the fascia surrounding the muscles. So, to understand the fascia, we must first understand, I'm going to put that in a slideshow format. So, we must first understand that there are four types of tissues in our body. So one of them is connective tissue, which makes up the myofascia, or should I say, um, yeah, the myofascia is within that group of tissue. You've got the epithelial tissue, which is like the skin, etc. Nervous tissue, which is our neurological system, and the tissues that compromise that. And then you've got muscle tissues. And they're the four types of tissue that we have. Um, so if when we're looking at fascia, we see that fascia is integrated within the muscle tissue and the connective tissue. Yeah. And in all fairness, actually, um, definitely the nervous system is kind of travels through our fascial system. And yeah, basically the fascia is everywhere. But that's the four types of tissue that we have. And when we're looking at myofascia, we're mainly thinking it's integrated within the connective tissue and the muscle tissue, or going through the muscle tissue, whereas the nervous tissue kind of travels through the fascia, but it's not one with the fascia like the muscle or connective tissue, or that's currently what we're aware of at this point in time. Science is always changing. So when we're looking at the fascia, we get different layers of fascia. Now, if we look at this image here, we can see that this is our skin, and that's the surface of our skin, and you can see the hair coming through it. Now, a lot of the superficial fascia is really just underneath that layer of skin. And that superficial fascia is loosely connected. And when we're looking at it's integrated with the wrapping around of our muscles. So what we can see here, we can see the superficial fascia on top. And then when we're looking at, not to get confused, but when we're looking at the deep fascia, we can see that, that's when it becomes more integrated with in the muscle, traveling through the muscle, etc., and makes up that nice connective sheath, as I'm going to demonstrate. But the thing to just be aware of in the simple terms is that you get different types of fascia in different parts of the body. And just underneath our skin is superficial because it's closer to our skin. And more closely connected to our muscles is what we call the deep fascia. Then we've also got another fascia, and that is the visceral fascia. And the visceral fascia is, that's the one that surrounds our organs, like the intestines, like the heart. And that's the reason why, we can sleep on our right side and our heart will stay nicely positioned in place because that fascia is so thick and abundant where it's kind of encasing everything but also holding everything at their relative distance. And when we're thinking of fascia, I like to think of fascia, what spaces to, you know, in space, where space is everywhere and it surrounds the planet. Um, Fascia is kind of like everywhere in our body, So it's that it fills in that space within our body. And so let's look at what fascia is a little bit better and the makeup of fascia. And before we go into that, I just want to skip a slide and just show you, all this kind of web-like structure is what is, known as the fascia. But, that fascia, in a sense, is very superficial. But then you've also got deeper layers of fascia, which actually goes through and inside the muscles. Yeah. So just having that nice picture of that fascia filling in the available space around it. And then if I take you back to this slide, we can see that fascia is made up of three substances. One of them is the most um, uh, abundant protein in our body, and that's the collagen. And when we're looking at collagen and let's just say the aging process, when people are very young, children, etc., young adults, you can see the collagen very tightly bound in the sense that, their skin is very smooth. There's no wrinkles. It's, like fine cut. Whereas, as one ages, as the collagen, begins to deplete, and change, that's when we can see, people face it becoming a little bit more wrinkled, people getting more deeper lines. And that's really because of the collagen. And that's why when you look at a lot of adverts, you can see they're all promoting X factor collagen creams, etc., to help, so they say, restore the collagen in the face or whatever tissue to make one appear more youthful. But then we've also got elastin, and elastin does what it says on the tin, like an elastic band. Once something's stretched, it will go back to its normal shape. Again, as one ages and the bodies change, the elastin is not not doing their job as efficiently as when one was younger. And that's because, the levels of these proteins begin to change. But there's also another substance within the fascia, and it's called ground substance. And it's got ground substance and made up of their various components in ground substance. But the idea is to help the lubrication of the fascia so things slide and glide the way they should. But also, there's other understanding that the fascia also, the ground substance in the fascia also helps to provide nutrients, because remember, everything in our body is alive. So there's, everything has to maintain its so-called homeostasis or the correct balance. And, depending on what temperature, depending on what time of the day, depending on the climate, depending on, all these factors, the body needs to be alive and ready to change and adapt. So the ground substance will be helpful in that. So yeah, so all of this substance is in what we see here. Yeah, this is what this is made of. We also got other things like fibroblasts, and fibroblasts are like, let's just think of them as baby cells, ready to grow and specialize into what the body needs. And that changes depend on the pressures, the environment, etc. So there's a whole lot of other stuff, even, like white blood cells also helping to clear up the debris. Like that's what the macrophage does. But you've got basically fascia which is alive within us, and that's the main thing that we need to really think of. That this is not a dead substance, this is not something that's just there, not changing, not doing anything. This is very much alive. So, we can still change and adapt it. So, okay, so when we're looking at the myofascia, we can think of the fascia as something which is, well, this is a definition. There's a very good book on the fascia that therapists, have in their library. It is called Fascia, I believe. But the definition is the soft tissue component of connective tissue system that permeates the human body. So that's something basically that is so integrated and so abundant and so much everywhere within our body, like that extra space, like that third space or that space, which it just fills in and it has a relationship to everything else. When I think of the fascia, I think of things like the mycelium network, you know, underneath the earth. And, it gets me thinking of all these other things that is just so abundant in nature. So still following a certain rule of that, you know, everywhere we see in nature, there's always something that is connecting everything else together. And that's what the fascia appears to do in very different and wondrous ways. Okay, so what is myofascia? So yeah, so myofascia, the only difference is myo meaning muscle, fascia meaning connective tissue. So in this sense, we're going to just take our mind really through the muscle route and channel. Yeah. So what we're gonna do here. Oh, let me just explain. So, you can see the myofascia, and believe that that might be a model of I think it's the muscle it's trying to illustrate here. But that's all the fascia, the fine fascia connection from the just underneath the skin to the muscle. That's kind of superficial fascia. But then when we look here, and we can see kind of like the separation of the muscle um, bundles or the different type of muscles, I should say. We can see that they're all separated by a deeper level of fascia, you know, and this is what will connect the muscles with one another together, so the muscles will move instead of, at a very isolated structure, we can see that every muscle along a specific pathway. So this will be known as a myofascial sling or or kind of that connection. Another name for it is, it has been coined anatomy trains, myofascial sling, and also myofascial lines. And we'll see how that's connected to other things in the healing methodology of things like acupuncture. So what we have here, we have like the bottom of the foot, and we can see that that bottom of the foot is really so connected to the calf muscles, which is linked to the hamstrings, you know, and all the way go through the spine, all the way up to the head. And that's just one long sling, all interconnected on a deep and a superficial level. And this is why when we we might injure our calf muscles, but we can feel a little bit of tightness going all the way up the leg. And it's because of this interconnection through the fascia. So also the fascia just allows muscles to move in a more energy efficient way. So, muscles, they use up energy in the form of ATP, and that energy, it would easily fatigue the muscle if the muscle was working in isolation. But the fascia, which permeates through the muscles, so we can see that the fascia here becomes one with the tendon, and then that same fascia within the muscle becomes a little bit more superficial as it comes around and over the muscle. And then as it comes around and over the muscle, that will connect to other groups of muscle, and then it will still go at a deeper level through those muscles. So everything is so interconnected in a way which makes movement much more efficient. Yeah, so as I've been getting into ultrasound more and more, I've got an ultrasound machine in the clinic with me. And this is a common image that I will see. And again, there's that appreciation of what we have here. We've got the bone here. Um, and usually on an ultrasound image, you'll just see a white line and there will be just blackness here. But in this diagram, they've put a bone, which is quite good because it helps with the visualization. But you can see that myofascia is that whole, is connected and one with the muscle. So, you can't separate the fascia from the muscle and vice versa, and then you just see all these little compartments. So on an ultrasound, when, you get the movement, again, you can see things gliding so nicely as one whole system. But that's just to give another representation of what someone might see if they're having an ultrasound scan, or if they're, being assessed for an injury, etc. And yeah, you can see other layers of fascia which are thicker and other layers of fascia which is a lot thinner. But in a practical sense, this is something that we should, within ourselves, experience on a day-to-day basis. So what we have here, we have different lines. So like where I was on this slide, you see that whole line there. That's just a real life kind of, they've taken from a cadaver um, image of what this is representing. So you've got your superficial lines, all that's connected as one system, the front and the back. Then you've got functional lines, and this you might see more in functional activities, as the name suggests, like running, whereas these will need to synchronize their contractions across. So, when you're running with your arm, it's like, one arm up, one leg up, etc., or one leg back. But it's all connected in a kind of crisscross pattern. Just the same when you're walking, your arms and your legs are moving in unison and in opposites to, again, everything's about energy conservation. The body's designed in a way so that it doesn't basically waste energy unnecessarily. It wants to save the most amount of energy so it can do other productive stuff. So yeah, I'll talk about is just a little bit about the healing injuries and how fascia is integrated within that. So where we have a healthy tissue here, and then we have a strained tissue here, that might be like it's been injured and it's a little bit hot swollen. There's an active injury here. Um, but over time, the bit that influences the fascia is when scars start to form. So if we think about, again, like the last slides, how the fascial system and the muscles are holistically integrated within each other. Yes, we separate them by thought, but on a practical sense, in a real life sense, there's no separation. And what we see here, any injury to a muscle is going to influence and injure the fascia around it. And we experience this in real time where, let's just say, if you think of the last muscle injury you had, you got stiffness and how that stiffness affected other areas of stiffness around you. Yeah, so you might knock your knee or injure your ankle, and then your calf muscles are tight. But the injury was all the way down here on your ankle, and then you're wondering why is the calf tight up the top? Because that's the way the body, one, protects the area from further injury, but it's also a way that the body kind of makes everything more uniform, more closely uniformed to still produce movement in a very energy efficient way. Yeah. So, and the reality with scar tissue is, which I'll show you here, and this is yeah, that's a book from this book is about scars, but so as I said previously, scarring is part of what we call proliferation. You get inflammation, then you get proliferation, which is where the body lays down more collagen fibers to protect it. Um, and behind a line of 10 centimeters long scar, you get about several centimeters of thickening. So if that's a line of the scar that you can see, you might have like a good several centimeters of thickening along that whole scar, the width and the length. So there's a lot more happening underneath, and this underneath bit that we don't necessarily see or don't necessarily appreciate, which is then gonna influence everything underneath, compressing nerves, compressing arteries. So this is where people might injure their elbow and get pins and needles because through the fascia and the scar tissue and the extra collagen fiber that's being laid down, we're getting the squeeze of the arteries and anything that squeezes the squeeze of the nerve I'm talking about first. And anything that influences that will cause things like pins and needles. Then, on another level, we get also like um, on a smaller level, the squeeze of capillaries, which are smaller blood vessels. I think arteries are designed in a very, the way our body is designed it with such intelligence that it's almost so perfectly designed that we go into the atmosphere with that the body is designed in a cell-safe mechanism which kind of understands all our limitations. So the way it's designed, it when we do enjoy ourselves, it's designed to give us minimal damage at the same time. So yeah, just let's just think of this in a simpler term. Let's just think of this as a smaller blood vessel, a capillary. But what we get here, any compression of the capillaries, that will cause, some slower blood flow go into an area. And where blood flow is a little bit more stagnant, that's where you don't get the healing, which is as efficient. And the reason is because you need blood, the river of life, to go to a tissue to keep it alive. Anywhere where you haven't got blood flow, that area will die. Um, we're talking about more significant stuff, not necessarily in the case of, oh, I hit my elbow, but at the same time, depending on the damage it's done, and the severity, you can still have problem with necrosis. But we're just thinking of the simplest side of things. Any impediment of the smaller capillaries will just delay the healing, and that's where someone like myself also who, if there's any soft tissue um, tightness or myofascial restriction, we work on it to help create more better blood flow so that the healing significantly increases. And I've seen people in my clinic where they're 65, they've had multiple car accidents and just working on the area where they've had restriction for 20 years, compounded by something that happened 40 years ago. And when you actually work on the area, you will get a release, And what I personally do, I take pictures of the clients to put in their notes just to show the difference and the before and afters. And, it's so clear that once you get blood flowing and releasing certain tension, it leads to faster recovery. So talking about the treatment side of things, there are lots of things that we can do to help restore the myofascia. And the first one I want to just talk about a little bit is the acupuncture, because it's very interesting that something in a system that's been used for over 3,000 years in some texts or even longer has such a big correlation to these myofascial slings that I was talking about earlier. Yeah. And the reason why is when we're looking at the lines, we can see a big correlation between what we physically can see. So imagine on the left of each of these structures here, basically that's a representation of this, what we can physically see if we had to open up the body. However, what's so interesting is that we've got meridian points and, you know, I don't know if you can see my dummy. I don't know if you can see me, but if you can, these are the lines we're talking about, all these meridian lines. And what's so interesting is that they correlate to the myofascial slings, the physical thing that we can see, correlate so strongly with the meridians in our body. So we got the superficial back line, which is, part of the calf connected to the hamstring, connected to the back and the head. And then we've got the bladder meridian, which runs past all these points here. Then we've got the gallbladder meridian, and personally, the bladder meridian and the gallbladder meridian are acupuncture points. I do acupuncture quite a lot, but we can see that it's so connected with the lateral line. But as therapists, we can see and feel these connections, and all these connections become much more prominent when a muscle has been injured because everything stiffens up. So if someone again injures the outside of the ankle, I'm always gonna feel tightness on the outside of their shin area, and the more extreme it is, I might see compensation and changes going up, which I'll always focus on as part of my treatment. And we got other methodologies such as cupping, which helps to open and separate the fascia, increase the blood flow. We've got massage, tried and tested, even from a very, just from a very kind of logical or intuitive, I should say, perspective. When we injure an area or something becomes feeling a little bit stiff, we might rub it, you know. Then we've got things like the gua sha, and this is a tool I've got in the clinic as well, but this is just a, a company that's just made it more physio friendly. But you've had simpler equipments before. In certain cultures, like I know certain time period in China, they would use a coin, you know. I think it was a silver coin or a copper coin or something, and they would do exactly the same thing where they're rubbing the fascia smooth. Um, and then yeah, you've also got there was another one that yes, just simpler ones like even something like a hot bath, the heat and the temperature making everything a little bit more relaxed and eased. So there are many things that can influence the fascia. Um, and then also strengthening is a good way to make the fascia, the muscle integrity so strong and synchronous. And you know, I'm a big fan of the gym. But the reason I didn't put the gym in this case is because sometimes the gym and the heavy resistance, a lot of the times on a kind of mainstream level, we can see that the gym contributes to certain fascial tightness where people do need a release once in a while, especially if they're training extremely hard. But these ones I've put here, so we got Pilates here. This is a form of reformers Pilates. Then we've got yoga that's meant to be demonstrating. And then we've also got the Tai Chi. All of these things are helping to stretch our fascia, increase the blood flow, increase the circulation. So yeah, the main take home from that is just really being aware of our fascia, understanding how where it is, how it runs through the body, how it's integrated, and it shows itself in many forms, like the going back in the kind of mesh-like structure, or the very physical structure that we can see as a connection through our body, such as the posterior sling or the posterior myos fascial sling. Um, and you know, we can observe it in different ways, all of them kind of being one and the same thing as the cells differentiate slightly and vary slightly depending on what they're needed for. And then just being aware that, you know, that, you know, injuries can make the fascia more rigid, and we can do things like manual therapy to release the fascia, but also strengthening and the correct strengthening stuff, the holistic integrated strengthening stuff to make the fascia more resilient to not be bent and swayed by the smallest of things, such as missing a step. All right, but yeah, that is that part done.
Yes, Kristos. Yes, thank you. That was really good. Your explanation there into fascia. That was quite deep, going into the structure and giving clarity on the anatomy and the functional side of things.
Mm.
Mm, it lined up nicely. It lined up nicely for myself. Get into more of the stuff that you mentioned, the healing side of things. Yeah,
This should be interesting.
you know what I'm saying? We're gonna touch very briefly the structure, but we're not gonna go too deep into that because we're
Mm.
gonna try and link the structures together, and then we can have a brief discussion about the whole thing afterwards, link everything together. All right, then. Well, if that's the case, let us see what's going on. There we go. All right. So let's begin. So we're gonna go into the myofascial system and its connections to the meridian channel, and we're gonna look at a few of them just to give some clarity, because we see there is a similarity through a lot of the different channels. But as there are quite a few channels going on, we won't have enough time to actually go through and discuss all the different channels. Let's say on a basic level, there are 18 different channels energetically, where we're looking at the 12 channels or the 12 meridians. And then we also have the additional 8 extraordinary channels. So that would make 20. sometimes most of the time people are probably thinking of 14 channels, which is the 12 meridians and the two extra channels from the extraordinary. So when we're looking at these channels there, and we're looking at the myofascial lines, what Kristos just explained to us, generally we can say they are following the same pathways, the same pattern, and they generally do the same thing. And that is to have a local effect on the body. So if you're working on any myofascial point or any fascial point, any intersection or any superficial fascia, or if you're trying to penetrate into a deeper layer, it's still going to have a local effect, which is going to be very local. Because the myofascia is like a web, it's also going to have a whole body effect. So it's going to go across the whole system. That one point you manipulate. So if you're doing soft tissue work around your elbow area, then that's going to radiate down to your fingers and up your shoulder, also up your head and also down into your back. Same way, if you're massaging or if you have an injury, as I mentioned, anywhere in your body, we have referred pain. And a lot of the time, this referred pain is a result of this the fascia transmitting information. So between the two systems, and we're going to look at it a little bit closer, we observe they follow a similar pattern or pathways when we start to look at them closely. But we also observe another thing, that is the intention for the meridian channels is just a little bit different. Your intention. So for a therapeutic point of view, when we're looking at the myofascial system, our intention is quite physical or on the surface you're touching. The actual structure, the functional anatomy, the functional movement, the area where you're feeling pain, the direct location of the muscle or the connective tissue in the area. And we're not really thinking about organs, emotions, feelings. We can, because we add these layers on as we become more experienced as a practitioner or someone who practice Qigong. But what we notice with the meridian channels, although they follow the same pathway and pattern, there are subtle deviations. The main intention is the affiliation with the organ. And that's why each one of the channels are named after an organ. Where in the myofascial line, each one of them is named after the function that it does. Yeah, it's all functional. So that's the main difference that we're observing here, that the intention shifts when you're looking at the meridians to observing the organs. But observe this: if we can, if they follow the same pathway and the same pattern, the meridians and the myofascia, and we've been observing the meridians for the organ system. That means we're looking at emotions, feelings, type of food, colors, these different things. Then we can apply the same concept to the myofascial line. And we're going to touch a little bit of that. So here's a brief look at the 14 channels here. And it's quite comprehensive when you look at it like this. But we observe that there are layers upon layers, as this is just one layer of energetic pathway. And each one of these that we see here, whether it be the spleen or the stomach, or it be any one of these systems here, we're going to observe the kidney and the bladder. So let's say the kidney, which is from the instep, from underneath the foot, and it comes along the inside of the leg, up the groin, and it comes up through the center of the body. And we're going to isolate this one and the bladder meridian in a few moments, and we're going to compare this. But this is the general layout. This is the general map. we overlay this with the 8 extraordinary vessels, and then we underlay that with the sinews, another pathway. Then we have a multiple pathway thing going on, all fed from the extraordinary vessels. So this is it's a general overview of the myofascial lines from the back line at the far left to the lateral line, where you see at the side there. We got the spiral line, which is in the middle with the cross across the center. We have the functional line, and then we have the deep front line at the far right. But these different meridian anatomy trains, or these different pathways, so how it operates when you dissect the body, because how muscles have always been determined is that when you start to take away the fascia, the connective tissue, and this is with a cadaver, and you start to peel away these layers, we're looking to see what muscle or tendon attaches to, or from a tendon muscle belly to another tendon, and where that attaches. And we just clean up the space to see a pure, perfect alignment, which is artificial. So what started to take place, and this has happened through history, but there has been a few people have depicted fascia and drawn fascia. But what took place is in the 90s, and I think this is following Ida Rolfing. Then we have Tom Myers, who took this further. So from Tom Myers, and from his dissections and the work that he done, without cleaning too deeply, without taking too much connective tissue away, and properly having pure muscle, red tissue, just by keeping that surrounding tissue around it, he was observing, where does this lead to? And is there a connection? And does it just stop with the tendon? Does these fascial lines that get thicker, are they getting thicker because they're connected to something else? Or are they just getting thicker because of injury or because of repetitive use? And this is what he was investigating. And what we find is that muscles continue and connect to each other through fascia, as what has been described to you already. So on the most fundamental level unit, we have these fibroblasts, which depend upon the stress and the strain, how they determine how they develop. And then you have the collagen. And you see the shapes, circular and straight. It's like observing in this world here. Everything's on a yin and yang. Everything's on a binary, on a 0 and 1, as a functional unit, round and straight. So between these two here and the collagen is what we're looking at. The collagen. Because what we observe with the fascia itself, it acts as a conductor. This is the main thing that we're going to look at, the conducting capabilities of fascia. And a conductor is anything that allows energy to flow through it. This is what a conductor is. Any material. So, as fascia allows energy to be conducted through it, it's a conductor, but it's not a battery. So when we're looking at how energy is generated and then how energy is transmitted through, we have to look at these two units, the muscle and the fascia. And then the muscle will act as the battery, which is a rechargeable battery. The rechargeable battery provides the electrical impulse, and the electrical impulse, because as each nerve fiber spindle is around a muscle fiber and goes into the peripheral, and it's going through these various layers, it's passing through the fascia and through mechanoreceptors, or should I say through vibration, or through the shift of pressure, through the shifting of any quality in that space there, then we have this information conducted or transmitted or passed through. So there are many layers of this going on. So from the bone itself, if you can see right where the bone is, how you have fascia around the bone itself, around the cartilage. As you go from the bone out, then you have this deepest layer of fascia. The fascia also around the muscle, to your superficial fascia, to the surface of your skin. And through these layers of fascia, the main thing that's going on that we're observing is the conducting of biochemicals and mechanical information. So from the biochemicals, we're observing through fascia itself, we're observing mechanical stress, which stimulates the release of growth factor and cellular response. Also, through this process taking place, we're getting the communication of any injuries that happen. And so the body knows how to respond and how to manage. This is how it has this wisdom that was mentioned just a moment ago through the fascia system. Electrical impulses are facilitated through this process here, as we just discussed. This is all the biochemical signals. And we have molecular signals going on. That is the body adjusting and adapting to the situation, the fascia contorting and changing due to whatever circumstances are going on in your internal and external environment. Because we are constantly in flux. The fascial system as a web is malleable and changeable. And these signals do support this processor. And then we have the mechanical stuff or signals through the fascia that take place. The information that's conducted on tension, shear pressure, or the force distributed across the body. These mechanical signals for an internal cultivator, someone who practices Qigong, Tai Chi, Pilates, yoga, who does, may not, yes, gymnastics, they also create this concept of a hollow body. There is this concept, what we call the internal stretch, and it's the ability to feel internally the body expand and open. And it isn't a muscular experience, and it takes place through the muscles relaxing and the fascia having this opportunity to expand and stretch. We have to fix one point of the body and rotate and turn another part of the body. And while doing this, we expand, whether this is our expanding our breath or expanding our hands or the feeling an expansion around the body. But this compression that takes place allows for an increase of energy flow all along the fascia. Also, we got the vibration that takes place through the piezoelectricity. So as the bones vibrate, they create an electricity potential. That potential is sent across the web, and that web connects to the whole body. That's why if you're doing any kind of tapping routine or vibrating or bouncing, or you get one of those plates and then you're on them for like a 5 minutes standing or with your foot on it, vibrating plate, and you're there vibrating. After a while, you feel it through your whole body. We say we feel it through every cell, like we feel it cellularly. That's because the fascia wrapped around every tissue is transmitting this information here and is resonating. Even the actual fascia itself, we often look at bone as a crystalline instrument, but the fascia itself is a crystalline structure. The way in which the layers are are lined upon each other. So as a result of muscle contraction, muscle activity, muscle movement, which is due to electrons, which creates a magnetic field, we have the opportunity for our fascia to conduct electricity or energy or chi. Remember, there's various layers of fascia, and chi moves through various layers of the body. So we're going to investigate the 12 channels. So we've looked at energy from a point of view of piezoelectricity, movement through vibration, through chemicals, biochemicals being created in the body. This takes place, and we can say an aspect of that is source chi, as well as the food that we eat and how it's cultivated in the spleen, for example, and how that energy is moved through the body. This is all a part of our source chi, which feeds into the rest of our body. So we're going to get into the 12 channels, and we're going to take a deeper dive, a closer look from a general point of view. We're not going to look at the particular points or going to break it down in that way there. But we're just going to observe the similarity between the structure. So for the deep front line, which we can see there on the left-hand side, as we observe with the kidney channel, it starts from under the foot, the same as the deep line, and then it travels round the ankle and up the inner leg. And similar, we have at the thigh, for the actual kidney channel, that stays, because we're not looking at it from the point of view of a muscle. And if we were to be looking at that as a point of view of a muscle, then it would be something like abductor longus that is traveling along. But that whole group is still a part of the deep front line. So that travels up into the groin itself, from the knee to the groin. So far, we have a similarity here. And as the channel for the kidney, it carries on up through the groin, from above the groin, either side of the belly button, because we have the central channel going along the center, which is going through the center of the navel. So we're either side of the navel, and we're going up to the apex, just where the diaphragm is. From there, we kind of come out a little, just between the chest and the nipple, and then we come up to the clavicle. But when we're looking at the deep front line, we observe that there's a similar pattern takes place. We just have incorporated here the neck, and that neck muscle was quite superficial. It's not actually the deep neck muscles we're looking at here, but the line, because each channel or each meridian, we are observing this from the foot going up to under the clavicle, but there are also pathways that go internal, and as it goes internal, it feeds into the organ. So we have example of the diagram that shows the internal parts that it also encompasses. And for the deep front line, it also encompasses the heart, the diaphragm, also, as well as the kidney. So we're looking at very similar activity going on here. Between the kidney, the main purpose of it is strength, flexibility. The kidney meridian mainly is looked at our vitality, so it's closely associated with Jing, or our vital essence. If that's the case, then we're looking at strengthening bone, muscles, flexibility, tendons. We're looking at even fascia, if we're looking at vitality on a fundamental level. But generally, when we're looking at the whole kidney system from an emotional point of view, then we're looking at fear and anxiety. If we're looking to tonify this kidney channel through an emotional observation, then we're looking at courage. So courage is the emotion that balances the kidney channel. When we're looking at what the kidney channel or meridian does in relation, or let's call it the deep front line, then we observe that it stabilizes the core, it supports posture around the chest, supports the neck, supports the pelvis and lower back, all the way down to the legs. So it's the same thing as in the sense of strengthening, supporting our flexibility, giving us the ability to stretch and move through our full range. As it's stabilizing our core, that's like our inner strength. That inner strength is the courage that allows us to overcome our adversity or the anxiety that we feel. It's through being able to stand up and straighten up, open up our chest, and not to close the body down or to drop the shoulders or to make them narrow, which we would say somebody who's gone into a state of fear, worry, and they've gone into themselves when that whole front line starts to collapse. So the main purpose is to stabilize our posture and our movement of this front line. So when we're treating this front line here, whether we're doing self-treatment of the foam roller, stretching, self-massage, whatever we're doing, when we start to infuse these ideas into it, then we start to improve the function it actually does. Because where mind go, blood flow and the consciousness follows. So we have the kidney channel that we just observed, and what pairs the kidney channel is the bladder channel. And these two channels are vitally important, especially in winter. So during the winter time, these are the channels that we are looking to tonify and strengthen. The kidney channel we just observed is a positive, follows a positive or yang quality, and the bladder channel follows a yin quality. So here we have the superficial line, back line, and that is depicted on the left, as you can see the muscles, and we have the bladder channel on the right. And again, we can see that the channels again are very similar, without tracing them too deeply and without going to each point. But from the outside of the foot, the little toe, in this case for the back line, it's from under the foot, the plantar fascia. Well, when we're dealing with centimeters, it's close enough. It travels up through the same calf and thigh. There are two channels. The channels follow a different pathway, but nonetheless, they are very similar because we are following muscle on the left-hand side of the myofascia. Follows the same pathway. Erector spinae has quite a few different layers. There's about four, can't remember. Supraspinalis. Erector spinae is just one name of the different muscles that go across. So we have two pathways that follow up through the bladder channel, which connect. And for the superficial line, it's from the plantar fascia up the back of the leg, through the bum, up the back, through this over the scalp, and to the forehead, to the front of the head. And this bladder channel ends up in the eye. So from the foot to the eye. And when we're looking at the bladder channel, we're observing that the main, from a positive health point of view, it regulates mind and spirit. It regulates brain activity and heart activity. If it is dysfunctional, then we experience headaches, stiffness, chills, fevers, runny nose, headache, pains in the eye, sinus issues, postural stuff, hamstring issues, back problems, pain in the lower back, these kind of stuff going on also. When we're observing now, the superficial back line, it follows the same line, and its main function is postural control. So all those areas, if you're treating it from a bladder point of view, is the same area as the lower back. So what I mean by this, how you have headache, stiffness of neck, because the superficial back line deals with postural control. And as an example, the neck is a muscle that hardly turns off. That muscle there is on constantly, whether you're lying down or standing. The only time that muscle there deactivate, suppose if it's in a cast or something, but yeah, that muscle don't deactivate often. You turn to the left or right, that sternocleidomastoid activates regardless. So all these neck muscles here are part of our posture. And the whole fascial system, this is why it's all important, because the whole fascia, the whole fascial system connects all these different pathways together. It's like a structure. Because the fascia is crystalline in structure, and that crystalline structure has perfect geometry. It's like fractal. That perfect geometry allows for improved movement of energy, or it allows for energy to move through a certain direction efficiently. So the last one we're going to observe here is the arm line. And for the arm line, we're just going to look at the yin, the inner. Well, actually, I put the both of them there. The front and the back of the arm. So if we're looking at the inner arm, we have the lung, pericardium, and heart. And although it's not separated to such detail in this diagram here, when you're looking at this lung channel from the thumb to the elbow, you have a muscle that travels from there the same way it crosses over the elbow, the same way it travels up your arm, and it travels up into your shoulder from your pectoris major through your deltoids, through your biceps, through your corabrachialis, through your forearm muscle there, and into your thumb. That whole lung channel there is a part of the superficial front line. And the same as these two other channels are also closely associated once you observe, and the same for the back line. For the three channels that run along the back of the arm, whether it's the deep back arm line or the superficial back arm line, whether it's either of them, these three channels occupy the same region here, the same space. So what we come to see when we observe the whole situation, that through muscle and connective tissue and fascia, through the biotensegrity of the body, that is through compression and decompression, or through pressure and tension, or through compression. Through these different states there, we're conducting information of some sort throughout the structure. The muscle provides this energetic pathway also, but we're also generating energy from our environment, which is going through the space. The beauty of the muscles, it just allows the system to have a rechargeable source of energy constantly We just need to refuel that as well. So the major benefits of a system that functions like this, when you're able to do, we ain't able to do too many movements, but we start to increase our ability to move. For example, our knees, we can't move through the full range, but as time goes on, we're able to increase the range and become more flexible. That changes our emotional state, literally. The same with the back. We have back pain, and to be honest, the world is like a stress in every moment. When we resolve that, again, we have an emotional shift. All these different emotional shifts is well documented in the meridian channel system, but we haven't got that clearly expressed within the medical musculoskeletal system clearly. But as we observe, there are clear correlation between the two of them. And as these correlations are so clear through the different activities that we do, this is why we feel so good. Depending on how we move, what we choose to do will affect different emotions, different moods, will have a different impact on the way we view the world and the way we view ourselves. The fascial system itself, it spreads it spreads the load through the body. And that's one of the benefits of biotensegrity. And biotensegrity is only possible because of fascia. This whole fascial system gives us this ability to, and it's not muscle that does this, to be upright, upside down, to do a handstand, to walk on our hands, do a cartwheel. That whole ability there, it's not muscle. To swing from one point to another, to do a swinging activity, that's not muscle. We would fatigue quite quick. All that stuff there is all fascia or myofascia, the work between the two systems. But when we do those things there, it has an impact on our emotions and how we feel. I mean, sometimes it's just the idea and it can restore that feeling. Like recently, yeah, I've had this real strong urge to do cartwheel in a space that is not possible to do a cartwheel. I'm talking about I could be even sitting here in my mind. I've taken that small little angle and I've done a cartwheel to stand up. And in my to do that physically is impossible because of the angles and that. But in my mind, it's quite possible. I'm tall. So like for me to do a cartwheel, yeah, my body's quite long. But I still imagine myself doing it in that space. And what I've observed from having that mental sensation or feeling is like it keeps on bringing up that child in me, that child quality, or the remember. I couldn't even do a cartwheel as a child, but I think because it's associated with youth, it brings that quality out in me. So it makes me feel quite joyful. And I haven't even done a cartwheel. And not to say that I can't do one, but it's just amazing how the mind works. As well, the fascial system, no matter what how we say this one here, no matter what vacuum you're in, yeah, it functions. It functions and it functions really well, no matter your size. All right, everyone. Yeah, so that's a little discussion about the channels.
It was very good and insightful, that one. Um, yeah, there's so much different points and, from connectivity, conductivity to the tensegrity to the just everyday posture and how everyday posture is influencing the meridians. And then, the key part, remembering how much of it is connected to the organs,
That's
you
right.
know, because that's something that, the Western approach of just the myofascial sling is not appreciating.
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, so it's really interesting in that aspect, and then just seeing how
Mm.
from the source, how it almost acts like a conduit of energy right from the source.
Mm.
And yeah, it's
Multiple layers, isn't it? There's multiple layers. As you
hmm,
say it like that, it's a conductor from the source.
yeah.
Within its core, it has this capacity.
And then the muscle being batteries, you know,
I know.
because
That's the thing.
it is the movement of muscles that is constantly generating the cycle of ATP and the energy stored within the muscle fibers as well as, the liver, etc. But we know it's stored even from that other aspect as glycogen stores, you
Hmm.
know. And I mean, the reality, I mean, I haven't looked at the research, but even from a Western point of view, it's like how much of this, how much of this electron chain theory, well, we're sending the name, it's a theory,
Yeah.
So it's like there seems to be a lot of light with the logic.
Suppose it's no different from the what do they call it? The sliding filament theory.
Hmm.
How the sarcomeres and everything slide and move because of the muscle contraction and how
Yeah,
it can
yeah.
slide. How much of that is fascia?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, according to when you look more and more into fashion, see it's everything.
You know what I'm saying? It's probably it's the fascia. We say probably because the research for it to be confirmed,
Yeah.
but we have enough. I suppose it's intuition and feeling when you've touched enough bodies and experienced
Mm.
enough.
Because the good thing about the sliding filament theory is it's a very physical thing that
Mm,
one could observe
that's
to
right.
a certain degree, or you could even observe it through the feeling. There's something sliding. You can see, even on the ultrasound machine, you can see the fibers coming and moving and separating and, all sorts.
That fascia. Because I
Mhm.
wonder if fascia has a possibility, is like, you know how the nerves, it's only because the microscope can see to that depth that we see the nerves. And how I
Mm.
understand it, once that becomes more powerful, we just see more nerves. And we just
Mm.
keep on seeing more nerves endlessly. And it looked
Mhm.
like the way this thing operate, um, the nerves are our roots that interact with the air around us. So we got nerves coming out of our body. Well, it's just on a microscopic level that we don't see. And,
Mm.
and I'll be wondering if this fascia is the same way. Like
Mm.
it just we already see to the level at the fascia, I mean the electron microscope allows us to see
Mhm. Mhm.
ultimately. And then once that becomes more powerful, then we see fascia again.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
So,
we see smaller units, just like how we see smaller units of cells. All we see now, all of a sudden we see what's they call it, neutrinos. We have
mm.
neutrinos now. Before it was an atom. Before it was a nucleus, yeah. And then before it was the quarks. And then it's just gotten smaller. And it's just getting smaller. It just makes me laugh, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Any question from the room?
About fascia. As we'll be finishing up in a few moments, even if it's relating to an injury, something that we
Or,
require clarity.
or a statement?
Mm. Ah,
So,
well,
no
I'm glad that
question, but thank you for a great presentation. You're more than welcome, D.
yes, we were discussing this stuff in class. We'd be talking about, hmm, okay, we'd be looking at the bladder meridian, isn't it? The bladder channel,
Mhm,
other than directly treating the area through soft tissue work, through a ball, or through, sometimes I think when we have an injury like this to a muscle, that to utilize the sliding filament, the music like the language like that, process, I don't think it's always the best thing. And
mhm,
we thinking that we have fascia wrapped around all of these different sacrum, these little microfibrils, these small little
mhm,
fiber muscles.
mhm.
This is why the stuff gets injured. Further,
Yeah.
when we actually, it's like we have to unstick it because it's
Mhm,
been torn and they're starting to mesh together. That we
mhm,
need to actually unstick that, and it don't unstick through stretching. Weirdly
mhm,
enough, so that compression using a foam roller on the calf, ideal. Sit on
mhm,
your bum, sit on your sofa on your bed, put the foam roller out, put that underneath your calf. You're good to go. Change the angle, change the angle, but ideally, in it, Christos, you want to work on the hamstring first.
mhm, mhm.
Work on the hamstring, the middle part, the back of the knee, get all that blood flowing along that pathway there. Yeah,
Mhm.
man. And then get into that calf with the foam roller again.
Yeah.
Rest it on the side, move it along, move it along. Good hour.
It's all connected, all connected. So you want to be working along the line as we showed you. And
Mm,
sometimes the area that it actually happens might be too painful. So you
mm.
can still effectively work a little bit away from the area where it's not painful and still has benefit results on the area that's painful.
Because Christos, that is why polarity therapy works so well, isn't it?
Mm.
Polarity therapy, where they
Um,
will say, we massage the wrist, your wrist to massage your foot.
mm,
Because the knee's so painful and we can't touch the knee, we're gonna go to the elbow. And we're gonna work
mm,
on the elbow area and release that space there.
mm.
But that's all fascia, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And also you got the whole neurological connection because I know one concept with acupuncture that they found more in the Western side is when you acupuncture one point, it sends a stimulus to the spinal cord, then it releases a whole lot of things. And that's why, we do advise that people just be a little bit mindful when they're driving after
Mm,
acupuncture,
mm.
that just to wait a little moment before they just rush off and
You know
do
what I mean?
anything.
I think it's the same for therapy work as well.
Yeah,
Especially
yeah.
because that just made me think the endocannabinoid system, innit? You just go into
Mm,
a state of bliss, you got all this stuff in your bloodstream flowing.
mm,
And I know acupuncture, same as manual therapy, increases it, I think, by 150%. Um,
mm,
your CBD and your
mm,
anandamide production in the bloodstream. So I can
mm.
see you be there with them deep release there. You need time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with any more questions? I would believe that any benefit from acupuncture was psychological. Now I know better. Yeah.
Hmm.
And there is a small portion that would be, um, psychological from the perspective that even just one's intention to get better,
Yeah.
and action to get better. You're setting yourself up in the right direction because I've had people who don't believe in acupuncture in a sense to the point where they're more resistant rather than don't believe they just different frame of mind. And that frame of mind is almost like they're blocking the benefits,
Mm.
because actually they've tensed up now because they've already said it's not going to work. Whereas people that seem to be more leaning on towards, okay, it will help me. I mean, it's almost miraculous, the results. So,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, my job is to get people feeling and leaving the treatment table better. And yeah, if they do, then that is the main outcome. I've improved their function. So yeah, there's more again, like the electron microscope that we're seeing more and more in that world. There's more other world that we just don't see and that we just don't know.
And there's
And
a deep affinity to these things.
mm,
There's a deep affinity. Because, I'll be observing that I'll be following certain patterns and certain lines. I'm sure I said this to you in the past. And when I um, look at it retrospectively, I noticed that I've been following these pathways. I've been following these patterns. I remember
mm,
years ago, there was a time I used to do a lot of work around the outside of the knee. So it became just where I think it's what is that? The spleen chapter spleen.
oh, the
But
inside of the knee is the spleen, the
what's
outside
the
is the stomach.
sorry, the stomach point.
Mm,
That's that stomach point there, just where the joint is, the tipular fibula,
mm.
that point there. I think it's for immunity, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, are you talking about right outside the knee? I can't see your knee. You talking about out here?
Uh-uh. Yeah.
Just
Uh-uh.
oh,
Uh-uh. No, go back to where you were, beneath the knee.
beneath the knee.
Yeah, there. But
Oh, okay. Yeah, that will be the stomach.
that's why you never go there first then if you know that was the stomach. You fella. Anyway, that is the what's it called? Boost the immunity. Um, Parasites, not parasites, bacteria, illness, feeling weak, whatever the stuff is on that level there. Yeah, that's what that point's for. But I did notice that I used to do that point a lot because one will have to come from there and go up the iliotibial tract,
Mm,
go into the hip, go into the hip, then go into the back or into the groin, depending on what the situation is going on. But I noticed
mm,
the whole thing was always linked, and I
mm,
couldn't just do the lower back without actually releasing that part of the lower leg as well, and then
mm,
getting to under the foot. And then when I come to find out that I'm following that particular pathway there between the liver, the stomach channels, and then the bladder, I'm like, wow, I just be living these lines, but it's retrospective because it's not a
mm,
thing that I studied the lines first. I studied, what I'm
mm,
saying, traditional Chinese medicine first. Then I was a therapist. We've done therapy
mm,
work. I was a therapist first for many years before I started to study the lines. I noticed
mm,
that I'm using the lines. It's
mm,
intuitive.
mm,
Go to a point, you realize you be pressing all these acupoints intuitively, and you can
mm,
read the point and say, "Wow." If you remember what you've done as a technique to a person, you can see you've just done a whole acupuncture process, and it
mm,
follows a story when you can actually
mm,
look at it and remember the points and what you've done, and actually look at the diagram and reflect upon it. Follow the story is profound,
mm.
and you pick up the signals.
We'll be back again next month. Keeping it edutained is the word.
You know what I mean? A new topic, a new thing to expand your consciousness, to think
Mm,
from a different point of view for a minute and add up things, add things up differently. Think out of the box.
mm.
Hmm. Well, everyone, have a wonderful evening. We will catch you in February. February.
Happy new Chinese Year of the Dragon.
Mm. Yes, so true.
All right then. All the best, everyone. Take care now.